ready for Ability MKE now on River West Radio. And we'll be starting, oh gosh, we're down to about 15 seconds here. So hang tight, stand by. We'll begin as soon as we get to the top of the hour. Or top of the hour. How about top of the minute? Now on River West Radio. And there it is. You can hear it in the background. That's why I gotta set them correct. Welcome to Ability MKE Now. My name is Sue Roskopf. Ability MKE Now is a place where we are dedicated to inclusion, connection, community, bringing people together and being relevant to everybody. That's what we do here. We bring people with disabilities and people that don't have a disability together, enjoying life here in the Milwaukee area. We all have our own experience with disability, whether it's our own, with people we know, or with people we encounter in our everyday lives. We all have different and unique abilities, and that is what we celebrate. Here at Ability MKE Now, we celebrate the ability in all of us. And joining us today is my co-host, Michael Martin Humel, a writer, speaker, and podcaster dedicated to bridging the gap between disabled and able-bodied communities. Michael, so happy to see you tonight. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you.
Always good to see you. Always got to check in. Any news on your end? What's all happening?
On the 30th, I have my event. So we got a couple weeks.
Just in a couple weeks here. All right. Yep. So on May 30th will be. Did I catch that right? May 30th is when your event is.
May 30th, and we didn't get to do it last month, so we're doing basically a repeat of what was supposed to be last month. So the theme is still autism.
Excellent. So, and I'd say that is going to touch a lot of people. That is something that we know people that have autism. We interact often, probably more often than we realize even, because it's one of those things that we don't talk enough about. So to be able to go someplace and learn more and get some insights like that is so valuable. So I'm thankful that you are putting this together and making that available to everybody.
Thank you.
So, well, and I do want to take a quick moment. We are here on River West Radio, and do you know that tickets are on sale right now for River West Radio's 3rd annual Sunset Gala Cruise? So if you want to join in on that, it's on Friday, May 29th. So the day before your big event, Michael. Friday, May 29th, so join us for an evening of food, raffle prizes, karaoke, and celebration on the water. And at the same time, you're helping to support the future of a truly local, independent radio station here in Milwaukee. River West Radio depends on community support, and this is one of our biggest fundraisers of the year. So don't miss the boat. Quite literally, we want you there. That is what is, we've been on this cruise, and it is a great time. So please join us. Get your tickets now at riverwestradio.com. And I'm so excited for our guest that is joining us today. Deana Elaine is a global keynote speaker and acclaimed author of the Tragic Whisperers trilogy, known for challenging audiences to rethink how they show up in leadership, communication, relationships, and everyday life. Drawing from her own experiences with childhood trauma, addiction, loss, and personal transformation, Deana speaks against complacency and helps people recognize the hidden triggers and patterns shaping their decisions and behaviors. Through her signature framework, recognizing the triggers and the patterns, trace the root, rewrite the narrative, and know your why, she empowers audiences to uncover root causes, break unhealthy cycles, and lead with greater clarity, purpose, and authenticity. Blending real-life storytelling with practical insight and faith-centered encouragement, Deana's message inspires individuals and organizations to stop operating on autopilot and become more intentional in how they lead, communicate, and show up every day, no matter what that looks like. Deana Elaine, I am so happy you are joining us today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Sue. I so appreciate you having me.
And I'm really intrigued. I know we've chatted a bit, but do you want to just dive in a bit more with what you all do? And I'm excited. There's so much here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a big territory. As you said, I am a global keynote speaker and author. Did not
Thank you.
plan on doing either of those any time in my whole life. I was a hairdresser for almost 30 years, a head chef, executive chef for the Hilton for another 20 some years. I am in my 60s. And, this whole time with growing up, I kept hearing noises in my head. I kept hearing I'd get these triggers and it would make me just go things I shouldn't have done. And I had to start thinking back. I had to start processing what is it that is going on. So I started journaling. My kids were saying, "Mom, you should write things down." And my husband of 18 years, he's like, write things down. What's going on with you? It's like, no. So once I started diving into this and really started tracing this root, it was because of being grown up in a dysfunctional, multicultural, multiracial household. Now, there's nothing wrong with multicultural. My father's Palestinian. He's passed away now. My mother, God love her, she was a spirited redhead from Kentucky. So put those two flavors together. You have mixed religious beliefs. You have different customs, just the way of everyday life. Different foods, different language, dialect. So you put those together, and you have parents, trying to raise you in America, but then realizing, no, we need you to go overseas because my sibling, she is dark hair, dark skin, dark eyes. So she looks the part of being an Arab. Now I come out, blonde hair, blue eyes, fair skin. So I get chosen to go live overseas at 6 years old. Well, if you do the math, back then comes along the 1967 war. So there I am. It was a 6-day war, however, to a 6-year-old, that was a lifetime, which it ended up being in my mind, a lifetime. So American Council had all the American citizens come back. That's what kept me from being raised 100% over there. Not that that was a bad thing. It just was not the timing for that. And just growing up, I had competition over here. I was called a multitude of names. And kids can be mean. They can be so mean and bully you. Well, overseas, I was considered not one of them. I was a half-breed overseas. So it didn't matter which continent I was on, never did really belong. As I grew up a little bit further on, at age 15, I was put into an arranged marriage. That was stateside. And I took off from that marriage literally the night before my 16th birthday. And that night, I told myself, I will no longer count the traumas in my life. And I'm not even telling you the number, it's in the book, but I just don't even think about that any longer. Moving forward, I thought I was being normal, with everybody else. You do a little partying here and you work and you socialize, and then all of a sudden that just wasn't working. So you divorce, and first you have a child, and then you divorce, and then you get married again and have 2 more kids, and oh wait, you get married again, then you have another kid. So hence the second book of Tragic Whispers, which it's in publishing now, is a Palestinian American mother held by God, bound by addiction. So this drug use, many years of cocaine, that was my drug of choice. Nobody knew. Some years time would pass, 5 or 6 years. Of course, I wouldn't do any drugs. I was having a child or trying to have a child. So it would be off and on, off and on. And it's like these triggers would just come. And boy, if we could just time our triggers, that would be great. We could
Wouldn't that be nice?
Right? My goodness, we could be in a bubble bath and we could be taking communion. Jesus drank wine, right? So we could be taking a little communion, and this trigger would pop up, and everything's all good and calm, and we work through it. Well, it's more like whack-a-mole. You pop one down and three more come up, and just back and forth. So I finally spiraled in my late 40s, early 50s with my husband now of 18 years, Keith, and he didn't know. He had no idea. That's how well I hit it. Yeah.
Wow.
And he put me into recovery. I drove, I was gone for like 13 hours one day, and I could not consume enough cocaine to get the noises out of my head. And after I told him, he got me into recovery immediately. He sent me out to California. We were in Omaha, Nebraska at the time. And so the healing started. And from there, the journaling became, okay, maybe turn this into a book. And, my kids were supporting me, and Keith was supporting me, and just doing this. And, with healing and addiction, now some people get it. Some people get it. God bless them. They get it the first time, and we're good, right? Well, I did it. I had a few hiccups. That's what we call it in the addiction world. I guess in a religious world, they would say backslidden. But we call them hiccups, and work through those. They weren't big ones, but it was enough to start feeling the shame and the guilt and just the remorse, which was just overwhelming at times. So you start the healing, then you start tearing it apart too. And you start learning and thinking, okay, what's a trigger? What is a trigger? A trigger is a hidden memory. Now, there's been a lot of scientists and research. Everybody knows, Sigmund Freud. Oh my goodness, he made all the parents famous. He's the one that brought parents in childhood, into the psychology of learning, the scientific, on and on. Okay, so he made all the parents famous. But even he discovered and came to the realization that we have these hidden memories, and until we start looking for them, we're only reacting because of them. So me reacting, looking to use drugs, which an addiction can be anything. It can be narcissism. It can be hypochondria. It can be gossip, drama, chaos. It comes in all shapes and forms and sizes. And it is not prejudiced or racist or anything. Addiction, it will come. And so you just start processing. And when you process and start to become aware of a trigger, then you can be aware of your reaction, which is your pattern, right? Make sense? Is this making sense?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So you break that down, and that's actually your first step to healing, is becoming aware of what you've been doing and why you've been doing it. And of course, then you're going to start healing, and there's several different ways of going through that, which we talked about therapy. There's mindfulness, spiritual, going to an elder in your church, for those that are religious, spiritual. I knew the Lord as a child. I was 10 years old, and I truly accepted him in my heart. However, during the next 35, 40 years, I put him on the back burner. I wanted to be connected to him. And the closest I got was literally saying I was going to church, and I would pull it on the parking lot, and I'm being very honest, but I do cocaine. That's as close as I got to going into the church. So, but when you can tell on yourself and admit it and use that to help others, because I'm not the only one in the world out of 9 billion people that has ever done drugs on a church parking lot. Now, those that say they haven't, well, that's something they have to deal with. So now that I started, had these the 2 books published, working on the third, I literally, the Lord spoke to me and said, you know what, girl, you need to start putting your voice with your pen, and you're going to reach more people. Don't hide behind a book. Yeah, that's great. You got it out of your head. And you get these noises because your mind gets empty of everyday activity. We were chatting a little bit before you actually went on air, and you had a gazillion things to do, right?
Always, yep.
Okay. So you're thinking, okay, let me get this done, let me get this done, let me get this. Well, and you have children, so that's occupying all this time. Well, then when that empty nest syndrome hits, and there's no more swim classes, no more dance lessons, no more soccer, no more football, none of this, that's when those noises start really getting loud. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's just, and I've studied it, I've studied it, I've studied it, and I've studied it again. And if you can know that trigger, or realize, being aware of that trigger. I mean, if there was a manual and it said, Deana had this trigger, had this memory, of the war, it would say she went and got drugs. Deana had a memory of her mother and father marrying her off. She went and got drugs. So triggers form a pattern, like we just talked about. So you break these down, and once you break them down, then you can break it into different areas of forgiveness, learning how to forgive, which, the Bible tells us it's a commandment to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It is a commandment. However, it is not a commandment for reconciliation. The Bible actually talks to you. The Lord tells you, do not associate with those that will harm you. Right. So you have to learn what the difference is. And then you set the boundaries. And boundaries are not to punish people. They're not. Boundaries are for us. They're for us to be able to continue healing. And that's really hard. I had to disassociate with my mother and my sister for a while. And that was very uncomfortable, even though it was a toxic relationship. That's all I knew. My father had already passed away. He'd been gone some 40 years now. He died very early. So it was just, they were upset because they're like, well, why can't you talk to us now that you told us that you're a drug addict, and why can't you talk about it if you've gone through all this therapy? And so it was like a double-edged sword. I was getting ridiculed and criticized for healing. And then the part had to come where they had to take ownership of their part, and they weren't ready for that. That's where the boundary had to come, because until they were ready to talk about all of it, everything, and when you're trying to heal, you're not necessarily looking for the other person to say you're right. I did that, I was wrong. What you're looking for is validation that this actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Because in our minds, we're, as a trauma survivor, we're thinking all the time before we get to that point of actually healing, is this all true? Did this all really happen? It starts growing and growing. And sometimes you just wonder, did you start questioning your own self. So you need validation.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully you can get that from the people that were involved in that, whether it was a bad thing or a good thing. Say you have parents that loved on you, but you still, there was something that gives you that pattern of trauma. Well, if they won't talk to you about it, how do you work through it?
Right.
So it just amazes me, honestly, now that that I actually speak on it. I learn something new every day, just by talking to people and what they've gone through. And some people with disabilities, okay, they have been traumatized, not with just the disability, but with everything that went with it. like, because we're all trauma survivors. It doesn't matter if it was because of a bad childhood grow up or a physical disease, or yeah, it doesn't matter what created that. It's who's going to help, who's going to stand with you, who's going to understand. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I can appreciate that so much too, because we need to have people that will stand by us. And gosh, when you're saying about validation, like
Mm-hmm.
that, it's like when you hear somebody describe the things that would be involved in reconciling and all that validation piece. I don't think I've ever heard anybody put it in that terminology that's what a lot of what we're looking for, but that totally makes sense to me. I get what you're saying and I agree. We all want to, kind of like what Michael says all the time, to be seen, felt, heard, and understood. And that's what I'm hearing here is what will make that difference.
You're right. You're right. And Michael, you are right. We need validation. We need, and it could be us being validated of, no, it didn't quite happen that way. And I've been corrected on some of my memories. It's like my brother, my half brother, God love him. He's amazing. I love him. He's my mother's son. But we grew up not realizing that we were, a half brother and sister. And he got along well with my father until he chose to go live with his father because of the trauma uh, and dramatics, of being an Arab family and him being so white. Bless his heart, he's so white. and I can say that, and I don't mean it as a racial slur, but when we are talking about dark skinned, Arab, Middle Eastern people compared to, as you see, very white, blue eyes, it is what it is. Um, but I lost my train of thought. I was getting so excited. The validation. Um, you know, he will have, he sometimes he'll correct me and say, "Sis, it wasn't quite like that." So, and he would go through. It's like, oh, and it's not a bad thing that he corrected. And sometimes it was for the better. Sometimes it was like, sis, it really was a little bit worse than that. It's like, well, good thing I didn't remember all of that.
Hmm?
But so validation can work on both sides for clarity. I guess clarity would be the best word. Validation is going to bring you clarity. There you go.
Yes.
Right?
I, I love that. And that is something I think we all search for. We want people to understand where we're coming from. We want that acceptance. Whether people want to put on that tough exterior and say it doesn't matter, it's like it does. We all want to be appreciated for what we bring. And I love what I'm hearing from you here. And I do
Yeah.
want to ask, do you have a website?
I do have a website, and it's literally my name, DeanaElaine.com. And if you go on there are some tools to help for healing. It kind of guides you through a little bit. There's several different pages they can then around and take a look. And my personal email is on there also. Again, it's DeanaElaine@gmail. And I welcome people to contact me. And if they need to talk through something, I'll hop on a call with them. I'll help them the best I can. And, all I can do is advise them of how I survived it. Because
Mhm.
childhood trauma, it tries to be a template for our lives. And that's not acceptable. That is not acceptable. And people need to break the silence. And notice I say not break your silence, it's break the silence. People need to
Uh-huh.
speak about it, about childhood trauma. And just they need to speak about so many things that they don't speak about. Growing up, we never heard about divorce and childhood trauma and things like this, illnesses and sicknesses. You just didn't do it. Well, now we do. Now we break the silence because everybody needs to be heard.
And that I think is the healthiest way to move forward. We need to be able to I think about the amount of relief that is felt when you can be in that position, when you can get that clarity, that it literally takes weight off of if yeah, we all know that feeling of what it's like when the weight comes off your shoulders when you're relieved about something. And that makes such a difference in your outlook, in where you're headed, all the things. So that I think is so, so valuable. No matter when it happens in your life, it's still worth going there. As difficult as it can be to go through that. I mean, I'm not hearing that it's an easy process.
No, no, it's not, but it's well worth it. It's well
But
worth
it's
it.
well
My
worth it.
goodness, it is. You just show up in a whole different way. Whatever that looks like to someone, the way you show up matters. Whether you're parenting or working or whatever it is, you are going to show up a whole different way. And I can attest to it is beautiful. It is wonderful. It really is. And I will say this, if I have just enough time to, I did talk about my mother a little bit, and I blamed her a lot for a lot of it. But I will say this, and sometimes I get emotional, so I'm going to really try hard. But for at times we didn't speak for years. I would make sure I always send her a birthday card, Christmas, Easter, whatever holiday. It was not acceptable for me in my mind not to acknowledge my mother. Okay, but that didn't mean that I had to continue that relationship. And before she passed away, it was about 2 years before she passed away, and my husband and I went and tried to collect her from Florida, and my sister wouldn't let her go. She got so bad that we had to have her amboed medically back to Branson, Missouri. And my husband and I were there, and my brother said, "Sis, what are we going to do? You're the only one. You're the only female sibling that legally can go around her." The others had created such havoc and chaos. We had to get emergency guardianship of her, and just on and on. Anyway, it was 18 months that I had the honor of caring. I didn't want to. I did not want to. I didn't like her. I loved her because of who she was. But the best gift I could have ever gotten was the day she asked me to forgive her. I just cannot explain the sacrifice that you go through healing, and what you do give up. You think you're giving up, even though it was toxic. You're not talking to your mother. Who does that? But to have that relationship that I had with her, there's no words to even put it out there. So for those that wonder, will I ever have a relationship with my parent or my sibling or that person? You really can. And sometimes it has to be working on their terms and yours, boundaries and working into it. But my mother welcomed me, and she did validate a few things. Other things she would just, because she started to get dementia. So I could tell when she was coming, what we call in and out. But I could tell she was in when we had that, conversation. And I don't know if it was conveniently she went out when I'd asked her about a few of the memories. God love her. Like I said, spicy redhead from Kentucky. But when it most mattered, she was in and she was there. And we both forgave each other. So at the end of the day, that it's such a beautiful feeling. It is.
Such a difference. And to be able to have that peace, to have that comfort, all the things, that makes such the difference in not only your relationship, but that affects other pieces of your life then too, right? When one thing gets cleared up, it's that piece, it makes a difference in how you show up everywhere else in your life. So it's worth it. It's worth that going through that process. And
It is.
Any last take home message words you want to share?
Gosh, our scars are our empowerment. So think of everything you have gone through and hold on to it and decipher what serves you and what no longer serves you, and then let it go. Give it to God, because God's grace will meet you exactly where you are, and He will be there for you.
This is amazing. Thank you so much, Deana Elaine. For all of us here with AbilityMKE now, we thank you.
My pleasure.